Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a deep pool of material. We've got articles on celebrity politics, democratic theory, journalism ethics, and they're all circling one pretty powerful and dramatic idea.
And that is that the culture of fame, of celebrity, is actively undermining the very foundation of informed public discourse.
And democratic legitimacy itself.
Exactly. It's a crisis we see playing out on the global stage, and often with, stunning speed.
Like with the elections of figures like Donald Trump in the U.S.
Or Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine. Both men who really leveraged their celebrity status to get into the highest office.
And these weren't just political upsets, were they?
Not at all. They fundamentally reignited these academic discussions about the structural threat that celebrities can pose to established political norms.
So to really get this, to understand the threat, we have to start with this core concept you mentioned.
Right. It's called epistemic power.
Epistemic power.
Put simply, it's the power one has to influence what people think, believe, and know. It's the ability to shape reality for other people.
And the scary part is how that power is acquired. In democratic institutions, power is supposed to be connected to expertise or some kind of vetting process or accountability.
But with celebrity power, those checks are completely bypassed.
It's like having the biggest megaphone, but with no qualification to actually speak into it.
Precisely. That's the central problem. Celebrities have a vast degree of this epistemic power, but it's entirely unconnected to any relevant expertise in, say, policy or governance.
And that goes back to the classic definition, right? The Daniel Boorstin one.
Yes, exactly. A celebrity is simply a person well-known for their well-knownness. Their value isn't their skill. It's just their capacity to attract attention.
Which is the most valuable commodity in the modern media environment. So if we accept that fame can trump qualification, how did our systems, democracy and the news, how did they evolve to let this happen?
Well, it's a fascinating and sort of self-perpetuating loop. You have to start with the political system itself. We live in an age where problems are increasingly complex and global. You've got climate change, supply chain crises, migration.
Things that are really hard for the average person to wrap their head around.
Exactly. So voters, faced with this overwhelming complexity, they often struggle to assess, detailed policy platforms.
So it's easier to just trust the person than the platform.
That's it. When policy gets too complex, voters tend to shift their focus. They look for leaders who seem individually capable, charismatic, trustworthy.
Someone who can take all that complexity and boil it down.
Yes, someone who can successfully subsume all those massive issues under, easy slogans and a compelling story.
So the focus moves from the party, which used to have a vetted structure and policies, to just the individual's personality. The leader becomes the brand.
And that is a critical democratic shift. The old vetting mechanisms weaken. Researchers note that, increasingly, it's the leaders who bring parties to power rather than the other way around.
The individual's fame becomes the main political resource.
Not their legislative history or their party's ideology, no. And this shift just accelerates because the mass media, especially commercial media, has a symbiotic relationship with these charismatic figures.
A relationship driven by money.
Purely economics. The media needs eyeballs, clicks, drama, and let's be honest, a sustained, nuanced debate about tariffs or carbon taxes does not generate that.
No.
What does? Brevity, drama, simplicity, conflict.
So the media is literally paid to promote the celebrity-like leader who guarantees higher ratings.
Right. And once a politician figures out this feedback loop, they invest everything into image management, into performance. They're not just politicians anymore.
They become performers.
Conscious performers, competing for attention in the exact same market as, pop stars and movie celebrities.
Which brings us right to the huge dilemma the press faced in 2016 with Donald Trump.
A truly disruptive celebrity figure entering the arena. Traditional news outlets who, pride themselves on being these serious arbiters, they are completely unequipped.
They struggled because he commanded attention, but in ways they thought were beneath the office. What did that look like in the actual coverage?
It created what scholars call schismatic coverage, a profoundly disjointed and contradictory framing of him.
How so?
Well, press simultaneously had to treat him as a serious contender who might actually win. That was their professional duty. But they were also covering him as a political novelty, or even a joke. They just couldn't reconcile the two views.
And you saw that in the language they used. I remember reading things like meandering fluffhead.
Doughy showman, a celebrity bomb thrower and provocateur.
That's language from a gossip column, not the political section.
Exactly. And this schism allowed the press to feel sort of superior, right? They were keeping their intellectual distance by mocking him. But, ironically, the mockery itself generated the spectacle that kept him on the air.
So it fueled his power.
It proved that attention is its own political currency, no matter what the tone is.
That's such a critical failure point. I mean, if the institutional press can't handle a celebrity candidate without sacrificing coherence for clicks, what happens when their own star reporters start acting by that same celebrity logic?
And that's the transition, isn't it? We go from a systemic failure to a massive ethical breakdown.
Which brings us to the highly publicized scandal involving the political reporter Olivia Nuzzi.
A huge star in that world.
Nuzzi was this incredibly visible reporter, known for her high-access coverage, especially during the Trump years. She was a celebrity in her own right within media, and the details here are, wow. But the core issue is that blurring of lines.
She lost her job after a personal relationship with a former reporting subject, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was exposed.
Who was, at the time, a presidential candidate.
It's the textbook definition of a conflict of interest. But the media reaction was less about the ethical lapse.
And way more about the drama.
All about the drama.
And that drama just exploded because it wasn't an internal memo. It blew up when Nuzzi's ex-fiancé, Ryan Lizza, also a prominent journalist,
decided to air his version of events publicly on his Substack.
a spectacle performed for everyone to consume.
Oh, that decision threw gasoline on the fire. Liz's account not only detailed the RFK Jr. situation, he made the sensational claim that Nuzzi had an affair with a second presidential candidate, Mark Sanford, before RFK Jr.
And that just moved the story from an internal ethical problem to, national media blood sport.
Absolute blood sport.
Okay.
I mean, PR crisis experts who analyzed it said Nuzzi's attempt to control the story failed the second Lizza mentioned the other candidate. They said she lost control of it the minute Ryan said Mark Sanford.
And Lizza, on the other hand, was seen as strategically using a public platform to sacrifice her, basically, to try and save his own reputation.
And you can't forget the other ex-boyfriend, Keith Olbermann, who publicly weighed in, just reveling in it, mocking Nuzzi, claiming he paid for her college, bought her designer bags.
It was a complete public shredding of her personal and professional life.
But the real consequence here isn't the gossip. It's what that spectacle did to public attention and to the credibility of the press. It proved the media's commercial interest in drama is just insurmountable.
And the search data on this was astonishing.
Tell me about it. In the 24 hours after Liz's post, the sheer number of Google searches for a specific crude term he mentioned exceeded the number of Americans searching for turkey recipes.
On Thanksgiving week.
On Thanksgiving week, that tells you everything you need to know about the attention economy.
When a top political reporter becomes the main character in a soap opera that outperforms Thanksgiving, the authority of the press just vanishes. It proves the most visible players, reporters, and politicians are rewarded for drama, not for disclosure.
And what about the politician at the center of it all? RFK Jr. experts noted he barely said anything at all. He was largely unhurt.
His celebrity image was already there. It was defined. The scandal was just a footnote for him.
Right. The consequence, the loss of a job, of credibility, of privacy, was borne almost entirely by the reporter. It's a clear demo of how celebrity shields power.
So what does this all mean? I mean, if celebrity drama captures all the attention and undermines the press, if the system just rewards spectacle, how is democratic news even supposed to function? Is there a working model that can restore trust?
Well, this brings us to a really long-running and necessary debate within journalism about its fundamental mission.
Okay.
It's often framed as this battle between two models, traditional journalism versus what they call civic or public journalism.
And traditional journalism is what most of us think of when we imagine, the high standard of reporting.
Absolutely. It's the just the facts, ma'am approach. It values objectivity, professional detachment, and it relies on conventional elite sources, government officials, academics.
The usual suspects.
Right? And professional journalists have a profound dedication to this objectivity. They see any deviation as basically becoming an advocate, which they believe destroys their credibility.
So the goal is to be a clean mirror, just reflecting what's happening, even if it's chaos.
Correct. But then you have civic or public journalism, which argues that that detached model is not enough for a healthy democracy. Civic journalism advocates for a much more active, solutions-oriented role.
How does that look in practice?
It means consciously promoting public participation and discussion. It means producing solution-based content instead of just reporting problems.
I'm changing the sources, right?
Crucially, yes. Using non-elite, diverse sourcing community members, activists, regular citizens as centerpiece sources, not just relying on the official channels. The whole goal is to facilitate democratic engagement.
That seems like a laudable goal, boosting public participation, but doesn't that force journalists to take a side to become activists if they're so committed to neutrality?
That is the precise tension. Research shows that a majority of journalists actually support the goal of the civic model. Yes, they want to encourage political deliberation and participation. Over 2/3 of those surveyed felt it was an important part of their professional role. They see the public benefit.
But there's a huge caveat, I'm guessing.
A giant one. They insist on pursuing that goal while strictly remaining neutral and objective. They're deeply cautious about adopting any activist roles,
Fearing it will lead to them making themselves part of the story.
which we just saw as catastrophic,
Yeah.
or that they'll be seen as pandering to audiences, which damages trust in the long run.
So this fear of losing that perception of neutrality explains why, even though they see the benefits, the structure of news hasn't really changed.
That's what the research concludes. Traditional source selection, using experts and officials as the centerpiece, is still the dominant pattern,
So journalists want to be objective messengers.
even if it means they sometimes fail to challenge celebrity power or facilitate meaningful public solutions because they're so constrained by that commitment to detachment.
So we've traced the path. Celebrity politics, which is driven by the media's appetite for drama, forces this focus on image and personality.
And that focus actively challenges the ideal of detached, objective, substantive journalism.
And the knowledge you now have helps you realize this isn't just about media gossip. It's about the actual mechanisms of power and trust in a democracy. When reporters breach the professional trust needed to hold power accountable, the whole system loses a critical check. So what does this all mean?
Well, consider this fundamental challenge. How can democracy, which depends on informed citizens who value legitimate expertise, actually function when the most visible figures, whether they're political candidates or the journalists covering them, are rewarded not for qualification or truth, but purely for their capacity to generate spectacle and command attention? This tension, this constant battle between expertise and entertainment, is the core crisis that you, the informed citizen, must now actively navigate in every single headline you read.